relatively mild day here in Durham, North Carolina, even though there was some rain earlier. And of course, a lot of people are paying attention to politics and paying attention to sports. We know we've got two Super Bowl teams that know where they'll be playing, and they'll be playing in Las Vegas, that being the San Francisco 49ers against the Kansas City Chiefs, and all along those lines. So a lot of people are going to be excited about that and excited about what's happening in that space. But as always on the dinner party, I've got some amazing guests. So I'm actually coming in on the backup computer, but I'll come in on the main computer later on. But I've still got some great guests. So we're going to learn more about what they've got going on in their life and what's shaking in their world. I know that I've had a busy week. Actually had the pleasure of doing a talk on history and the history of Haiti and Black Wall Street on that was on today is Wednesday, so that was on Monday. So I did that on Monday at the Hayti Heritage Center, a cultural arts center that I work at, and all along those lines. So that was a great conversation. Got to do it in front of folks that are archivists and librarians from four of our major universities, including UNC, Duke, North Carolina State, and North Carolina Central University. So that was great to do that presentation, and having some others that might be booked in the near future and along those lines. So I'm gonna bring in my guests, learn a little bit about them, because that's what we do on these dinner parties. We have these amazing conversations with these amazing individuals that I find through a variety of sources and learn more about what they've got going on in their world. So I'm gonna bring in my first guest and see what they've got going on, that being Amanda Harris, and I've got others that'll be joining us as well. So I hope everybody is doing well, and let's find out what's happening in Amanda's life and what's going on where she's at and all along those lines. So like I said, it's the dinner party. It's how I envision things would be if we were actually having dinner and I wasn't living in a small apartment and I was having folks in of different backgrounds and different kinds of lifestyles to see what they're all about and what's happening in their world. So how are you doing, Amanda? How is life treating you? And how are things going in your part of the world? I know I'm in Durham, North Carolina, but if you'll tell our folks where you are, and like I said, during the hour and a half, we'll just spend time learning more about each other and finding out more about this fantastic world that we all occupy and all along those lines. So you're first on deck, Amanda. So how are you doing on this particular day?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thank you. And thank you for having me at your dinner party. I can imagine the dinner party as well. I think that's such a fun idea. I love it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So definitely share a little bit about what you've got going on in your world, because the way I always envision the dinner party, it'd be like if I wasn't the single 62-year-old man and I was with a significant other and we were just inviting folks over, and there's no telling where the conversation might go because they would be coming from all kinds of backgrounds. So if you'll share a little bit about your background, and like I said, I'll bring in some other guests as well in a little bit. I'll get to the main computer, but if you'll share a little bit about your background, I'm sure this will be fascinating for us to start off with.
Well, sure. I'd be happy to. I'm actually in Richmond, Virginia, so I'm not too far down the road from you. And I'm an exercise physiologist. I have a medical exercise practice in Richmond, Virginia, that I see people both in person and online for a variety of reasons. My specialty is working with folks who have chronic low back pain. And the space I hold, Mark, as a medical exercise specialist and exercise physiologist is right in between really good medical care, like physical therapy and chiropractic care, and then more vigorous exercise activities like fitness and conditioning, or even sports, things like that. So that's pretty much what I do every day as I work to get people out of pain and back on their feet and doing the stuff that really moves them and that they love to do.
No, and along the same kind of lines, I was just thinking about that because I know a lot of times people are thinking about exercise. We know that we just ended the year of 2023. And of course, there's those other things called New Year's resolutions. And every year I always pledge that I'm going to do more exercise. I'm going to do better with my body care, and I'm going to do better in all of those lines. And usually every year I wind up breaking those things, even though I keep telling myself I'm going to do that every year. Even though I did go walking, unfortunately, it was to a restaurant, but I did think to myself, at least I'm getting exercise going, walking, and also getting the glasses fixed and all along those lines. But there is a pathway that I used to go to, and it's around near a pond, and I need to get back to walking or running around that pathway and everything, because that can be a fun exercise, and also you can get that relaxing company of seeing Mother Nature and all along those lines. But I just wonder how much of what I'm doing, the problem that many folks have, we pledge that we want to do these lovely exercises. We want to be more committed to our exercise program. and then we talk ourselves out of it. So I was wondering how much of that is in your work as well.
Well, my work is a little different because I'm not actually a fitness instructor where I'm pushing people to exercise heavily for 30 minutes a day, 3 or 5 days a week. Like I'm not in that space, but very similar to what you're talking about. And I love your what you were saying, that you have a pond you can walk around, because what I really ask people to do is, I think it's awesome if you can get that more vigorous exercise in 3 days or 5 days a week for 30 minutes to an hour. That's great if you can do that. But if that's not the kind of person you are, if that's not the world you live in, and that's just not something that's exciting or motivating to you, what I really try to get people to do is simply move their bodies more. So a lot of folks are doing exactly what we're doing right now. They're sitting behind a computer most of their hours of the day, and their joints are in, let's just say, some pretty predictable positions, right? Like your knees are in the same position they were probably in the last time you did the dinner party, and maybe the last time you were on the computer, right? Your ankles, same thing. You're not twisting much through your body because you're facing forward, you're facing the camera. And so a lot of us are having these movement challenges. We're getting these bodily aches and pains from sitting still or being in predictable positions all the time. Even those of us that, do move around throughout the day, I'll bet you could catalog the exact movements that you do in a daily basis, right? Like right down to what hand you use to brush your teeth. And so a lot of what I try to help people understand is that putting more movement into your day doesn't have to be vigorous. You don't have to work up a sweat. You don't have to go to a gym or go somewhere else. But what if you simply took what you do in a day and you moved in an opposite direction? So if you're used to folding your hips, your knees, and your ankles to sit behind the computer, what if you laid face down on the floor and you used your arms to press yourself into a gentle backward bend? Like literally take your body in the opposite direction. So I try to get people to see that you can do these little movements throughout the day, just change the orientation of your body throughout the day, and that can actually keep you out of pain. And if you're already in pain, we try to introduce things like that slowly and in ways that don't provoke your pain. But that's really the space I'm in, Mark, is I try to help people just find more opportunities to move throughout the day. So for instance, with your pond analogy, what if instead of worrying about walking around that pond for 30 minutes, you told yourself that you're going to walk around it once before you go to work in the morning and maybe once after you get home at night? Maybe it requires a headlamp or a flashlight. It's a little inconvenient, but it's only 10 minutes or something. I don't know how long it takes. I'm just guessing. But, can you find these bite-sized pockets where you can get your body doing something different, like over the course of your day, instead of in an hour where you're doing something that makes you sweat?
And along those same lines, really quickly, before I bring in some of the other guests, and also, like I said, I did see the other computers up, so get ready to switch that shortly and everything. But along those same lines and everything, do you find that a lot of times we ignore the pains that we have? I know that I had and part of it is that I don't have the best mattress in the world, the best bed in the world, so I need to do some changing around that and everything. But we sometimes ignore the pains that we have, because I know I had a crick in my neck, and I was definitely realizing that and was trying to massage it. I'm even having some friends who are like, yeah, you probably need to get a friend to massage that or something along those lines. But a lot of times we are stubborn, particularly us men, but I know women can be stubborn as well and everything. So I just wonder your thoughts around that, because definitely we can have these pains that are probably could be symptoms of other things, including bad posture and bad sleeping habits and other things. But I just wondering, as an exercise physiologist, is that something you find a lot of your patients ignore, probably to their detriment?
Yes. And I love the way you talk about that, because it's not just ignore. It's like we assign meanings to the pain that may not be true. So I had somebody even come in this morning who said to me she was noticing more pain in her ankle and that her calf was very tight. And she said, but I'm wondering if it's not just arthritis, because, I'm in my 50s now. And so I just figure that this is arthritis pain. Well, it wasn't arthritis pain, Mark. It turned out to be something that was mechanical with her back that we were able to address and make better just through a little bit of movement changes. but it was interesting that she had already diagnosed herself with arthritis. She's never had arthritis. But we give these things meaning. We might say, oh, that must be like crick in my neck. That must be because I'm getting older, not because my pillow's too high or my pillow's too low or my mattress needs to be replaced. That must be because I'm getting older. And so not just ignoring it, but assigning something else, some other meaning to it. So what I'd love to get your audience to do is when they start feeling these weird little aches and pains that they've never felt before, instead of ignoring it, start to get curious about it. I wonder where that's coming from. I wonder if there's
That's
anything
the
I did
echo. So
yesterday
I've got
that
to
brought
switch
that
the
on.
computer and everything. So if you'll make those changes, I'm going to change the name and get the computer to the right computer and everything. So definitely, if you'll just talk a little bit about that exercise, and I'll bring in the other guests as well.
Talk about, okay. So anyway, what I'm suggesting to the audience is that when you feel those little aches and pains and you're tempted to ignore them, or you're tempted to assign maybe aging to the reason, the cause behind that pain, instead get curious about it. Start to think about the movements that you did the day before, the movements that you did during that particular day, and see if you can find a reason for it. If it starts to worsen, you definitely don't want to ignore it. You want to go get it checked out by your doctor just to make sure that there's nothing bigger or more sinister afoot. So make sure that if there are aches and pains that you've never felt before and they are worsening, let's get them checked out. That's the big deal.
And along those same lines, and I'm going to actually switch back to the mic so I can actually be seen, and all along those lines and everything. So we're going to edit that and get everything going back and everything in that space, because definitely a lot of times folks are amazed by this exercise kind of situation and all in that way. So I'm going to bring in some of our other guests and also make some quick adjustments in terms of names and all along those lines. But how long have you been in Richmond, and how long have you been doing this work and everything? Because that's definitely something that I know a lot of our listeners will probably be fascinated, because like I said, this is definitely a global network and all along those lines. So if you can just share a little bit about how long you've been doing this work.
So I've been doing this work basically since I got out of graduate school. Now you're going to make me reveal my age, but I got out of graduate school in '96, and I had a couple of little side trips trying different careers, because when I was studying exercise physiology in my graduate degree, I was being pushed towards cardiac rehab. And so that was what I was really focusing on during my degree. But at the time, I also was dealing with a back injury that was very interrupting of my life, you might say. And so I was led toward working with people who had chronic back pain, and started seeing them while I was on my own journey and trying to find answers for my own back. And over the years, as I found those answers and as I started to develop a method that was working for me, it also started working for my clientele. And so my career was really born out of my own problem situation, you might say. So really taking care of chronic back pain and bodily aches and pains, I've probably been doing that since I would say 1999. So it was only a few years that I was not doing that, right? Like that's really been the bulk of my career. And then I started my own business in 2013. I had moved to Richmond in 2009. I had been in Charlottesville, Virginia before that. So I was at the University of Virginia before that.
And I'm definitely familiar with Richmond. I had an aunt that passed away of MS a few years back, and all along those lines.
Sorry.
But she was actually a principal in Richmond and had done some work in education in Richmond as well as in New Jersey as well. So definitely have a affinity and a love for that Richmond area. So it's definitely a wonderful area in that space. I'm bringing another one of our guests. We've got some great guests for the dinner party. So we're just going to learn more about our amazing folks. And of course, we'll continue some of the conversations and learn more about what folks got going on. So I'm going to bring in none other than Lynn Rivers and learn more about how Lynn is doing. So Lynn, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on. And of course, we've got other guests that will be joining us, and it's all about us sharing and learning about each other. So I've just learned a lot about Amanda and what she's got going on in the exercise space, but now I'd love to learn what you've got going on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. So I am actually a functional health and wellness expert and educator, and I assist people all over the world in taking their health into their own hands and actually understanding the root cause of the majority of illness and mental health issues too, and how to overcome them. And it's really profound. It's a really beautiful thing that I do. And I really just stepped into it full power as far as my courses are concerned lately. So I'm literally reaching people from all over the world. And I'm finding how powerful this is right now in this time of life. It's an epidemic. Chronic illness is an epidemic at this time. And overcoming so many challenges myself, I'm seeing the profound beauty in helping others navigate these things that they've just been prescribed time and time again to mask the symptoms. So that is what I'm helping people start navigating from this point forward.
And Lynn, along those same lines, I'm thinking Amanda might have some thoughts around this as well. Like I said, we got some other amazing guests I'll be bringing in very much shortly as well. But I know a lot of times people are concerned about how we overly medicate and we don't do enough in that sense of we're quick to run to a pill. We're quick to run to the medication. I know that I've got no kids of my own, but I do have 2 teenage nephews, and fortunately, as far as I know, they are not on Ritalin. But I remember even when I was dating a young lady, and her son, who is now an adult, was a kid, that they had him on Ritalin. And as far as I'm concerned, many kids are just naturally hyper. So I sometimes think that we don't overly prescribe some of these medications and all along these lines. And I'm not saying that there aren't times that they're not needed, but I was just wondering your thoughts about that, because it does seem like we as a society are quick to over medicate, and we definitely do it as adults, and we definitely do it with our kids as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Lynn. And if you want to jump in, Amanda, I'd love to hear yours as well.
Yeah, so I think we as a society, as a world, really, we do look for quick fix solutions. We have everything handed to us at the drop of a dime, whether it's a text message, an email, medication, it doesn't matter. We've become this quick fix society. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really detrimental to our health. And I was on a lot of medications as a child as well. And when I got to the point where I was in functional medicine and I started helping people take their kids off of medications, and it was such a simple and easy process, because once you understand what's actually causing it and you're able to switch it, it's amazing to see how many people are actually baffled by the simple solution, whereas doctors could be prescribing lifestyle and dietary changes, interventions, yet they're not doing that, right? It's not part of the business of the medical system. So they're not going to be prescribing that. But when people can actually see that there are simple solutions to correct these issues, it's really life-changing. And I think that's where we're reaching this now, because we have the platforms in front of us. We no longer have to go to the doctor to get this information. We're no longer like in the 80s. We thought everyone who wore a white coat, they were smart and they knew our bodies better than we did. So we didn't do anything other than go see them. Now we have so much different information at our fingertips. And so I think it's really starting to come to light that there's a much better option than just going straight to the pill.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing that I find with a lot of my clients, and Lynn, you probably run into this too, is that these other options, these more natural options, they're not always easy, because to your point, they can involve lifestyle change, nutritional changes, movement habit changes. And you spoke earlier of everybody's looking for a quick fix. Well, not everybody, but a lot of folks are. And I mean, I'm sure you run across this too, where people are just like, wait a minute, your solution is going to take time and it's going to be hard. And I have to make decisions every day that are really difficult to make. And those are the folks that are going to probably lean more towards those medications that are getting, I agree with you, overprescribed. Whereas the more natural solution that doesn't have the side effects, that keeps people healthier longer, is hard. And so I think folks really struggle with how hard it is. I mean, I think people like you and me try to help it be easier, right? Like we try to be the guide that helps people find the solution and help them along the way and keep them on track and motivated. But I mean, what we do is hard. Like it's hard.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is getting people to understand that it is lifestyle change, right? Like it all comes down, the root of all illness comes down to a lifestyle factor. Yeah. And there are 3 things that I found that if you switch, you will see drastic changes immediately. And so I can hand people the information, but it comes down to them actually being willing to take the steps. It's not hard. It's just not in people's comfort level to actually take the steps forward. It really comes down to this sense of self-care and self-dedication that a lot of people just don't have, because they don't know any better, right? We go through the society constantly doing external, doing for other people. instead of realizing the one person you need to take care of and give yourself that time and attention to is you. Without, your health, what do you expect to do for others?
Yeah.
Right. And, we're looking at what over 50% of the population right now either has diabetes or is pre-diabetic. And the number of people I have gotten to get off of insulin injections is through the roof. I mean, so many
That's
people,
awesome.
and it's just within weeks of changing certain things in their diet, and they're off of their insulin injections. And it's because they were willing to step outside of their comfort levels and try something different.
Yep.
And we knew that's what needs to happen. It's
Yeah.
like the
And
hardest.
along those same kinds of lines and everything, because I actually just did an interview on our morning show that we do every Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock with a gentleman, Jeffrey Sitkoff, who is working with a lot of our youth and everything, and working with some of the celebrities, a lot of those older celebrities like Elton John and Billy Joel, and even Anson that played, trying to remember the role, he played the role of Popsy on Happy Days and all along those lines. But he was talking about, because he's doing a lot of work in the West Coast. I'm not sure where you are, Lynn, and everything, but he's doing a lot of work in the West Coast with folks that are in that homeless population. So we oftentimes forget that a lot of our youngsters, I think he said there's like 4.2 million just in North America alone, or the United States alone, people that are homeless, that are in that transitional part of life. They're getting out of teenage years, so like that 17 to 25 time frame, and everything is what they do a lot of their work with out of that 4.2. But that was just a startling number to me to hear that we have that many homeless youth, and I do see them here in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm sure you see them in Richmond. I'm sure you see them where you are, Lynn, as well. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that and everything, because it definitely seems to me that that is something that we see and is not being dealt with. But I just wondering y'all's thoughts around that, because that is a pertinent issue as well.
Yeah, actually, that's one of my main focuses on my side time, and what I'm looking to build in the future actually revolves around giving people the tools that they actually need in the homeless population. You can't just give money to people and expect them to make changes with it. You have to give them the tools. You have to help them understand why. And when we do case studies, I'm actually working on a documentary right now, and it involves homeless population, and it also involves people in the prison population, where when they find out certain genetic mutations or certain food chemicals like plant compounds such as salicylates, and how those alone, if they have dysbiosis, can cause aggressive behavior, and it can cause mental disturbances and even suicidal depression. When we realize those and we can pull those out of diets for specific people who have these genetic mutations, their life completely transforms. I mean, that was part of my own journey too, with finding out that I had a salicylate intolerance. And so I was eating all of these high chemical plant foods that I thought were healthy. And turns out they were causing a lot of neurological symptoms because they are neurotoxins. And so when you can actually get these people the information that they need and get their neurological system functioning properly because of what any kind of dysbiosis that they have going on, their life can literally transform, because now they can function. Now they're actually able to be present with their life and understand where they are and where they want to go, versus just staying in that fearful space and not knowing how to move forward, which is what a lot of people end up doing in those populations. And you go to the prison population, and they don't want to be in there. They don't want to be in that space. They don't want to be aggressive or angry. They don't understand why. And yet, no, they're not getting the help that they need. And so the documentary that I'm making is actually focusing on these populations and how to actually get them the information that will help them overcome these situations.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I was just wondering, I know it's something you talk about, Lynn, and I'm sure that even my other guests and other ones that I'll be bringing in might have some thoughts about it as well. But I know one of the things you talk about is creating your own reality. So how did you go about creating your own reality? And definitely I want to bring in Kurt Nelson as well, who's a PhD, and have some conversations with Kurt as well. But definitely, how did you go about creating that own reality of yours and everything?
Well, so the first 30 plus years of my life was pretty tumultuous. It was constant ups and downs. I had chronic illness as a child, alcoholic father. The majority of my family died before I was 15 years old, and the rest followed soon after. I had 2 near-death experiences in my 20s, lost my partner, the same cancer that my mom died of. It was just pretty consistent trauma. And when my partner was dying of colon cancer, I was actually dying of my organs shutting down at the same time. And it was the first time that I actually stopped and asked myself, what am I creating? How did I attract a partner who's dying of the same cancer that my mom died of? And that just shook me to the core. It made me look back at my life and see how I invited in every single thing that I had encountered, because I was still living in this space of trauma and victim mentality. And I just kept drawing in the same situations that kept me in that same familiar feeling. And so it was in that moment that I really stopped and asked myself, what do I really want from life? And through one of my near death experiences, I had this awakening, whatever you want to call it, that it's an evolutionary process for humans we follow until we are able to take control of our lives. And then once we're to that point, then we create what we're looking to move into in our lives. And that for me was the pivotal moment of, I want to do better, so I need to be better. And that's where I really started taking my health into my own hands and creating a life that actually felt great and lifeful, because I was, inviting in all these dead people. And so it was just kind of like this. I want to invite in people who really want to be here and who have purpose and passion. And that was the pivotal moment for me.
Just really quickly, I want to introduce Kurt Nelson. I've got a couple of other guests that will be coming on as well. But Kurt, if you'll share a little bit about your life story, and I'm actually going to go out. I've got the background noise in the back, so I'm going to turn off screen to turn that off in the background and all along those lines and everything. But I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your story. And one of the things that I know Lynn talks about quite a bit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is I know a lot of people get caught up in this notion, and I don't think that we do it on the network, but there are times that people will think that they are falling into the victim mindset and the victim mentality, and all along those lines, whether it's around race, whether it's around orientation, or whether it's around gender issues as well. So I'd love to, if you introduce yourself, and if you and Lynn would like to have some conversations around that victim mentality as well, because I do know that that's something that a lot of people talk about, and I'd love to hear you introduce yourself as well. And like I said, I've got about 2 or 3 other guests that come and join this lovely dinner party with this robust conversation.
Sounds great. Sounds great, Mark. So thank you. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And you just went off camera, but your beard is much better than mine. So I was just kind of jealous there as we were going forward. So my background a little bit, I am a behavioral scientist. I have a PhD in IO psychology. And so it's been very interesting hearing both Amanda and Lynn, you guys talking about, all of these different facets and different things, because most of my work revolves around behavior change and understanding why people change and understanding the dynamics of the psychology behind that change, as well as, what are the things that we can do in order to make that happen. And so most of my work works within organizations, and we work a lot with employee bases where we're talking about having engaged and motivated employees, and how can organizations help in improving those situations for their employees. But we have also started in working in doing a lot of work in helping bring some of those behavioral science principles to life for everybody else. And we have some guided journals that help people, again, bringing behavioral science principles to life. And so helping you make behavior change and set the goals that you want to achieve in your life and various different things. And Mark, I think you asked the question, about kind of thinking about the world in which we live in and self-fulfilling prophecies to a certain degree, and the victim mentality of how we do that. And I think there's a lot of really interesting research out there when we think about what it is that drives our mindset and drives our behavior. And I think, Lynn, you've talked about, choosing your own reality and having some of those moments that can set you apart in various different pieces. And it is an element that I think is really interesting when we think about what it is that drives somebody's, how do they view themselves? How do they view how they show up in the world? What is the factors that are impacting how they view is this something that is happening to me, or is this something that I have control over? So a sense of autonomy, sense of, control in living their life in the way that they do. And it's always, there are a multitude of facets, as we always say. It depends as a PhD, right? We're not going to be narrowing me down to, well, if you do X, you're going to get Y. Well, context matters, and a variety of other factors matter. But I think there's a lot to be said when we think about, choosing our own destiny, and how do you set your mindset up for success, and what's that self-identity that you have in place.
No, and along those same lines, I want to bring in another guest because she actually talks a lot in her own conversations about how we have a habit of getting in our own way and all along those lines. So I want to bring in Hilda because I know that part of what Hilda talks about is this notion of us getting in our own way and how we oftentimes can get in our own way. And definitely that's something we even talk about on this network. And I'd love to hear from all of you that are here and a couple of the others that I'll be bringing on shortly because I am a big believer that we can sometimes be our worst enemies, and we can sometimes do a number of things in that. It can even sabotage ourselves, and I'll give an example of that in a minute. But Hilda, if you'll introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your own work, because I do know that you have done some work in this field and have definitely talked about how we can be our worst enemies and get in our own way.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much. I love to be in this dinner party. Thank you for the invitation. Well, actually, I'm a top executive leadership coach. I work with top executives in organizations, with leaders, entrepreneurs, with those kind of people that they love to invest in themselves to make transformation happen. I'm recently published a new book. Power Up is my first book in English. I'm from Mexico City, and I love to think about global communities. So that's why my book is in a different language than mine. And I listen at you guys, and there are so many things that I can grab from the conversation. You talk, Lynn, about quick solutions. And I think we love to have quick solutions, shortcuts, fast results. So my book talks about this counter mentality. And you said, Kurt, about mindset for success. And we have this mentality of how can I solve it fast? How much is going to take a change? I hope it's going to be really fast. It's 21 days and that's it, please, because I don't want to invest too much. So we have this mind that thinks in short solutions, and we need to think in a long run. In transformation just happen when it comes a lifestyle, as you said before, Lynn, and as Amanda said also. So we need to think more in identity, and he decide who do we want to become instead of thinking about goals. Goals is a short run. This is not a short run. This is a marathon. So take breathe, keep your pace, make efforts, and keep it until you have it. And you create a new identity.
No doubt about that. One of the things I talked about now, that's one of the things I was getting ready to get to, and I'd love to hear from both of you, and hopefully in a little bit, Rodney and Dwayna will join us as well. Those are the last two guests and everything along those lines. But I know a lot of times in life, and I know I've been guilty of it, and like I said, I'm not afraid to admit my age, 62, still in that single space and everything. And I know that there have been dating situations and work situations where I have literally talked myself out of the job because we know that we could be our worst enemies and all along those lines. And there have been those situations. Everybody's nodding their heads like I've been there, done that as well and everything. So I was just wondering, how do y'all get past that? Because I know there have been situations, and I'll use the dating example, where there have been young ladies that I might want to pursue, and I will think of all the reasons that I don't need to go ask them out. By the time I've asked them out, they've already gone and moved on to another relationship, or that ship has sailed, as the old expression goes. And I can say the same thing about job opportunities, because I'm in the art world, and there have been some art administration jobs that I probably could have qualified for and could have gone for, but I would find every reason to talk myself out of it. And by the time I went to the boss and said, "Hey, I'm maybe interested in being the director of X and Z," they were like, "Sam's already got that job. Nice try. You should have thought about it ages ago," and all along those lines. So I know that inner critic can be very detrimental. So I'd love to hear from all of you how you deal with that. So I'll start with you, Amanda, but how do you get past that inner critic? Because it can definitely be something that we face regularly, even in the exercise space. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mark. And I guess in my space, what I usually see in that inner critic is how people see themselves. Most of my clients come to me because they're hurting, and there's some kind of very real pain there. And one of the things that I had to learn very early on in my own journey with back pain was that I did not want to be the person who had back pain. I didn't want to identify as somebody who had a bad back, right? Like I didn't want to have to tell people, no, I can't do that because I have a bad back. And so one of the things that I try to help people do is change the way they see themselves. Like if you're seeing yourself as the person with the bad back, what else could you be? Like what else is there that you can be? Can you be the person that's the talented artist? Can you be the person that is a successful business owner? Or like what other ways can you characterize yourself? And then let's work on your pain as something that's distracting and something that's very real, but we're going to get you to the other side of it because you're not that. You're not your pain. And so often it's a exercise in reframing. You might say, really helping somebody see where they are shining, where they are succeeding. And sometimes even, when we talk about motivation and lifestyle change, it comes down to reminding people where they've been successful in some sort of a big change they've made in the past. They say something like, I'm not good at staying on track with a new thing. It's like, well, tell me about a time where you were. And often it's a time in business or a time in school or something like that, where they say, oh, I actually stayed on this task and I saw it through and I had this big success. It's like, okay, so see, you can do this. You can exercise discipline. You can be successful. You can identify as a successful person. Now let's just use those same things, those same strengths of yours, and we're going to put it in a space where you're going to use discipline in your lifestyle to bring about a change in your pain. So that's probably a little specific towards my population, but I think a lot of it has to do with helping people see themselves not as the person with the pain, but as something much more effective and beautiful,
Yeah, what is your thoughts around that, Amanda? Because like I said, I know that I've been definitely guilty. I mean, not Amanda, Lynn, of being not going for the things that I need to go. And I saw you shaking your head as well. So I was wondering how you dealt with that and how you have gotten past that and some of the advice that you give to people, even in your exercise lanes as well.
Yeah, so actually I was the queen of self-sabotage. And really it comes down to uncovering why you're self-sabotaging in the first place, right? Because for myself, I had a PTSD issue of seeing all of my family members die when they were happy. Like they reached a really pivotal point in their life and then they died right after. And so I equated happiness equals death. And so for myself, the way that I self-sabotaged was I would put myself in relationships that I knew I didn't want to be in. So then that way they would end exactly 2 years and repeat the abandonment wound, right? And so that's how I did it in relationships. And then with my career, I would get up to the point and people would start noticing and paying attention. And then I would just stop doing everything. And I would put courses out there and I would put them for free because I was like, oh, well, I shouldn't get paid for this. And then they would get so many reviews and they were doing really well, but I wouldn't accept money for the work that I was doing because I didn't feel like I was worthy to. I felt there was twofold. I didn't feel like I was worthy to, and I was afraid to because I thought, well, if I get successful, I'm just going to die anyway. And so it was really about uncovering why I was holding myself back. And it wasn't until I realized, well, I'm going to die anyways. And so should I be happy and do what I love doing and then reach the end of my life and feel like successful? Or am I going to stay in fear, never do what I want to do and die anyways? And then at the end of my life say, oh my God, what did I do with my life? And that perspective really just shifted everything for me. And for me, it was about taking micro steps, really small steps, just every day doing something to work towards the vision that I wanted for myself in the future. And when I would feel that fear come up, I would sit with it and I would just witness it. I wouldn't, push it away. I wouldn't try to fight it. I was just really about sitting in that space and understanding like, okay, it makes sense that this is coming up. Look at your past. It makes sense why you would be afraid of this. And really sit with myself in that moment and give myself that space to not do anything when I was in that fearful space. It came down to, when I felt good and I felt energetic and I felt like it was a really good space to move forward, then I would take a step forward, but I didn't want to put any energy into that when I felt fearful, because then that's where I really started to pull away. If I kept doing things and I was in that fearful space, that's when I would get overwhelmed and start getting anxiety, and I would pull away from that, instead of just like, for example, Mark, talking to women. It's like, okay, so just talk to women and get used to having conversations with them, and then take it a next step further, and just really do it in small steps. And I think that's one of the best ways that people can move forward, instead of trying to just throw themselves in full speed. And then they get to that point where the anxiety is just so overwhelming that the only thing they can do is completely remove themselves from it, because it was just too much. It is too much shock on their system.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. Kurt, around those same lines, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this as well. But I know part of what you talk about, even in your own talks, is how people can motivate themselves. And I know a lot of times we do not do enough self-motivation. We find ways not to motivate ourselves. But a lot of times people think that that's easy. We watch the athletes, and maybe we're getting ready to have a Super Bowl in about a week and a half. And a lot of people have seen those athletes motivate themselves, even though I was impressed with one of the players that actually credited luck versus the actual skill and everything. So I don't know if y'all watched the game, but the receiver that caught the ball after it bounced off the helmet credited a ladybug, because he literally said in the interview afterwards that he had seen a ladybug and that the ladybug must have brought him some good luck and all along those lines. So that was what one of the receivers, I believe it was for San Francisco, said, and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on how people can motivate themselves, and maybe that's what it is when folks are doing that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about a lot of rumination, self-talk, self kind of defeat in different pieces. Motivation obviously can be positive, and you can actually be motivated to go above and beyond. And there's an aspect of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And Mark, I love this idea of luck. We've talked with I'm drawing a blank on her name, poker player who does decision science, basically, where when we make decisions, we often ascribe the outcome to the decision we made, but there's always an aspect of luck that's included in. And, she had won many poker tournaments in various different pieces. And she's going, I can make the best decision in the world. There's a 7% chance that card is going to come up and I'd lose. And you know what? 7% of the time, that card comes up and you lose. So when you're making decisions, we often attribute the outcome to how good our decisions are made when we kind of dismiss all the luck aspect that is going in with that. So with that, though, when we think about kind of how do we get out of our own heads and how do we start moving and getting motivated in various different pieces, when we think about motivation, we can think about it from the perspective of, if I need to motivate myself, that's often a harder component to do than if we're trying to do things for others. And I think Lynn, you mentioned that, so often in our lives, we're out there and we're trying to do things for others and others and others. And we kind of forget about ourselves. And so there's an element of looking at our lives and our self-identity. And I loved the fact of, Lynn, how you talked about moving just a small bit every, a little bit, and kind of being okay with, maybe even not moving for a day or two, and not taking that step because you weren't quite ready for it. There's an aspect within psychology called cognitive dissonance, and that happens when, our self-identity and our behaviors don't match, right? So there's some misconnection there, and you can actually use that to power your motivation and to do different things. And so oftentimes what we have when we have that disconnect, that cognitive dissonance, is we discount it, we disassociate it, we move away from it. But if you actually go into it and you go, this doesn't feel right, so my behaviors don't align with my identity, and so that either means that my sense of self needs to change, or I need to change my behaviors. And so you can use that power. You can use that sense of kind of that butterflies, the angst that you get in those situations where you realize it's just not matching up, in order to help motivate yourself and move yourself beyond that.
Yeah, and along those same lines, and Lynn kind of alluded to it, and I've brought it up on some of these shows as well as other shows, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about it. We also sometimes don't know our own worth. I know that I've got friends in the arts, and I'm definitely in the arts and do stuff not just in media, but sometimes we do what Lynn was talked about, and we don't want to have people know the worth that we have and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts around that, because I do know that sometimes we are our worst enemies. I've got a good friend of mine that used to be the program we used to do the rental of a popular theater here in Durham, the Carolina Theater, and he used to tell me that everybody is a promoter till it's time to cut the check, which means that everybody's got great ideas until you have to cut the check, and then we find out that the ideas and the resources may not always be there. And he also talks a lot about the brain drain, which is where people want the knowledge but don't want to necessarily get the reward for what the services are, and all along those lines. So I'm just wondering y'all's thoughts about that and how y'all get past folks that are wanting to exploit your skill sets and all along those lines, because that's something that I think we talk a lot on this network and just in general about. But I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. But I'll start with you, Kurt, since you're in the business space and everything. And I do know that sometimes people are not being paid the worth that they need, even in the companies that they work for as well.
Yeah, I think part of that is how do you judge your worth, right? So what are the external measures that you're using? But then also, it's hard to take a step and distance yourself from yourself, because we can only see through our own eyes. We only, everything gets processed in this, couple pounds of brain that we have inside of our skull. And so, oftentimes our self-worth, we only view it from how we see things. So in other words, you can put on the best podcast ever, but when it's in your own head, what do you focus in on? You focus in on, oh, you know what, I could have said this differently, I could have done this different, and so you actually, we have this element where what do we focus on at the end of the day? You can go, and at the end of this, Mark, if you're like at the end and you get, hey, 3 people are emailing you, Mark, that was great, best show ever. And one person goes, Mark, I kind of thought it was a little flat today, right? What do you focus on at night? You're not focusing in on those 3 people who are talking about how great the show was. You ruminate over that one person who gave you that downside. We tend to do that. It's an evolutionary factor, and there's lots of things there. But one of the ways to kind of judge your own worth and to really do that is if you have a good group of friends, right? They are the ones who can kind of maybe take a step outside of your own element, where you're constantly looking at what you could do better and how this can improve. And they're going, man, you are doing well. You need to do that. And so one of the ways that we talk about within business is like, hey, have a group of cohorts that you work with that, again, they don't have to be friends, but they at least know you. They understand the value that you bring. And as part of those conversations, talk about that. Talk about what it is that you need to do in order to get to that next job. Oftentimes people are too afraid. Oh, I need to get, 3 more years under my belt. And you're going, no, you don't. You can go and you can do that job better than the person who's in the position right now. So you should go for it. And so oftentimes just having that outside perspective can really help.
No, definitely, I agree with you. That speaking of people with an outside perspective, I was going to bring in the final guest, that being Rodney. I know he's got his PR lady that's here visiting with us as well and everything, and hopefully he'll come in and he'll share some of the perspectives that he's got, because he's definitely got that $1 million kind of background and all along those lines and all in that space. But while I'm in the process of getting him up and ready and everything in that space, Lynn, if you'll just share some of your thoughts around that, because you do a lot of work in this space as well, particularly in terms of coaching people to be wanting to accept being better as much as they should. So if you could share a little bit about that. And then I've got a question for Hilda, because I also know we get sometimes different cultures that are being perceived differently as well. But definitely I'd love to hear your thoughts, Lynn, as I'm here to bring in Rodney as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to self-worth, we can really get stuck on, again, it comes back to that past trauma and what we experienced as a child, and bringing that forward into our adult life. It's very typical. It's not uncommon, to see people still carrying these wounds from their childhood. And I think that is what really creates a lot of people's perceived value of what they think that they're capable of getting. What did my father have? What did my mother do? What were they capable of? And really sticking within that parameter, thinking like, oh, well, I'm only going to be able to equate to what my father was capable of creating. And I caught myself on that own path of looking at my dad and seeing everything that he did. And I kind of was watching myself follow in that same track. And for me, it was just like, wait a second, I can build so much more for myself. It's not even about what other people perceive me as and what they think I'm worthy as. I have to know what my worthiness level is for myself. What do I think I'm capable of doing and being in this life, and moving forward from that space? I don't need external people to validate that. And I think that really comes down, the validation is a really tricky piece, because it can be really profound and beautiful when it's done in a healthy way. But it can also be really detrimental to your entire existence if it's done in an unhealthy manner from either angle. Whether people are praising you or if they're putting you down, it can be really transformational on either side. And so I really think it comes back to knowing who you are and being so centered within yourself, and knowing you can sit alone. You can be, I've been in this very solitary space for about 7 years just because it's my preference. And because of that, I was able to really learn more about who I am and what I want from this world. And I always lead from my own experiences. And I don't really seek external circumstances of any kind of validation or anything of that nature, because I like to be in charge of what I'm creating. And if other people want to say great job, or if they want to tell me something, that's fine. But it doesn't make me make changes to anything that I'm doing, because I'm very internally guided. And so I think it really comes down to just seeing your own self-worth and moving from that space alone. And so the help that we can give people is to learn how to navigate themselves and to actually step inside themselves and find what their center is and who they are. And I mean, that's the greatest gift to life, right? Is if when we can know who we truly are and what we want from our lives, and we can emanate that energy because we're living so much in our truth, because we're doing what we love and what we want to do. That is the most healing energy that we could give this world. It's when you're not doing what you want to do, and you're only doing things because you're forced to, right? Or told to by your parents that this is the way that you need to do things. We're not living in an authentic space from that perspective. And so that's what we're emanating. And then of course, that's what we're starting to attract back to us, because we attract who we are. And so it's a profound thing to just help people figure out who they are and what they want from this world. That alone just like shifts their worthiness factor big time.
Yep. And along those same lines, Kurt, just really quickly, and then, like I said, I did have that question for Hilda and everything. I know that a lot of corporations, like I said, I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, and a lot of corporations that even before the pandemic were trying to make sure that people were being very health conscious and doing a lot within their healthy environment. I know that I want to say Cree and definitely SAS had efforts to have gyms and other things there, and we're even doing wellness things also. But I just wondered, do you think that our corporations and our businesses, both big and small, are doing enough to make sure that their employees are developed and maintaining all four aspects of their life? Because to me, we are basically mental, physical, emotional, and I would argue spiritual as well. And by spiritual, I do not necessarily mean religious, because I don't consider myself deeply religious, but I do consider myself spiritual, because I do pay attention to what's going on in nature and what is beyond what I can see, and all along those lines. But that's just kind of my philosophy, because I'm not an avid churchgoer, but I do have a spiritual belief in the sense of having a spiritual connection and an ancestral connection as well. But do you think the corporations do a good enough job, and particularly both our large and small corporations?
No. I mean, if you look at corporations today, there are a few, obviously. I mean, and you can find them, and they're open to bringing in health and wellness. They're open to mental kind of resilience type work and various different pieces and spiritual aspects of that. But for the most part, when the dollar ends up at the bottom of the road, what they're looking for is for people to be productive in various different pieces. Now, I think that's short-sighted. I think that is a very myopic view of looking at, the overall people, particularly in any type of organization where you have people as the main driver of the business, which I would argue is the vast majority of your employment and organizations out there. Any expert kind of component, anywhere where you have customer service, where you're having people interface, right? The ability to have productive, healthy, happy employees is key to success for an organization. And I don't see them doing enough. You do get companies that build a health center on site. You get the gym there, or you get some discount on a gym membership. You got some where they'll throw in a once a month training and bring in a meditation or yoga expert and various different pieces. But overall, I see some managers and some leaders who are able to bring that in for their part, but in general, I'm not seeing a big movement from organizations to bring that in and make that a real big piece. I wish they would. I wish they would.
Same here and everything. Hilda, I was wondering, you're talking that, and a lot of times we see that corporations from different parts of the world and different cultures will have a different attitude. One of the things that people, and I'm just saying this teasingly, will say about the Latin culture is that notion of the work break or the siesta or all along those lines and everything. And some people have said that is actually a healthy thing, and they wish that more American companies would do that and all along those lines. But do you think we pay enough attention to the cultural differences, and also do we do enough a job of making sure that we are culturally aware with our business as well?
Yeah, let me say something, because I totally agree with Kurt. And I think if not the corporations are thinking about performance and happiness, I do want to bring this notion to the companies, those distinctions, and to make aware people that they can perform in a better way, stopping a little bit their inner critic, paying attention of what the saboteurs are, overcoming their own way of getting in their own obstacles, and to also be happy and be healthy and be in balance and reduce stress and give their best and enjoy. And that is a way of working with performance and with happiness, with delivering results and with feeling great. And when you allow people to participate and to have a voice and to bring some ideas and to create possibilities, and you add all the cultural differences, you can bring happiness to the workplace. Yeah. But it's adding all those differences in the cultures.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. Hey, Lynn, along those same lines, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, what is a lot of times people talk about the tribe and finding your tribe and definitely getting that tribe going. And I'm a big supporter of that. Have a tribe of my own that I consult with, some that are family members, some that I do have a very close family, and all along those lines, and some that are friends, and even to some degree, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, some that have passed on, I still feel that they are impacting my life, because I definitely believe in that connection to the ancestors and all in that space. So definitely that is something that is what I am a believer in. Not everybody is, but I definitely believe in that ancestral space. But one of the things that I sometimes, on the opposite side of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts both around that tribe connection, is some people have, how can I put it? Not everybody in your tribe has the same goals. So sometimes you have people that will try to take you down the path of what their vision is. And sometimes you have to be able to use a very simple word. I know it's only 2 letters, but sometimes we have a hard time with that word as well. So I'd love to hear from you and Amanda. It's that lovely letters called N-O. And sometimes they will want you to go down in the path and to take their vision, whatever their vision is, and make it your own vision. And it might not be your own vision. So I just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do know that we sometimes, it's a shorter word than yes, but sometimes we have a hard time saying no at everything. So I was wondering how you deal with that. So I'm sure there's times that you had to say no, even when your friends were trying to pull you into saying yes and everything.
Yeah, well, this is actually kind of funny, because it goes back to the typical 9 to 5 that we're talking about, right? The corporations. Mm-hmm. And I did say no very early on in life, because it is set up for failure. It's set up for, like Kurt was saying, it's productivity. Are we doing well? Just make the money. And the reality is, it's not set up for health and wellness. 2 days is not going to give a person enough space to really take care of themselves and do what they need to do to reset. And so I said no very early on in life. I'm not doing that. That is not my path. And it triggered my dad, because my dad was, he worked at Intel. He went to work, he got the paycheck. That's what he did. And so that's what he wanted for me. And I was just like, sorry, not going to do that, and he was a little bit more flexible, because the reality is my mom, they gave me the freedom to grow up to find my own truth. I wasn't forced into religions. I wasn't forced into sports. Did I play every sport? Yes. But I wasn't forced into doing anything that was outside of my yes or no zone. And so I grew up being able to say no very easily compared to the majority of people. If I didn't like something, I said I didn't like it, and I didn't have to do it, right? And they trusted me, and I had that mutual trust, because they allowed me to find myself. It was just kind of a really easy understanding. But I also think it's funny that you mentioned the ancestors, because I had very early on near-death experiences. And from a young child, I had prophetic dreams, and I was able to talk to my family members who passed. And my mom, every once in a while, will still come through to tell me, hey, this is what's happening. Pay attention. So don't go into this next opportunity that you're asked to do. And every once in a while, she'll still do that for me. So I consider that my tribe. That's my golden ticket, right? But it's not often. But it really is a big deal as to who you have in your life, because if they're not growing, you're not going to grow. You are, what's that saying, that the 5 people that you surround yourself with the most is who you become, right? And that is so true. If your friends aren't going anywhere, they're not evolving, they don't have goals to make themselves bigger in some form of life, that's what you ultimately end up doing as well. And so like I was saying earlier, I don't know if you were on camera or not, but I have spent a good 7 years alone, because I really did end up falling in love with myself, which meant I care who's in my life. And I have a few really great friends, but they live in many different parts of the world. But I know that I can turn to them and ask them anything or tell them anything, and they're going to be honest with me. They're going to be, they're going to assist me in some form. It's not going to be to pull me down. It's not going to be to make decisions for me. They're going to help me reflect and hear myself and see what it is that I'm actually wanting to do, versus just saying, oh, well, I think you should do this because I would do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think it really comes down to knowing the no, being able to say it, yes, but also being able to understand what other people are telling you, and to not just take that on as your own truth. I think it's a really difficult thing for people to do, because we want that validation, which we were talking about earlier. But when you can say no and you can actually move from that space, it is really powerful. And the things that you can do from the space of no is oftentimes way more powerful than what you can do from the space of yes.
No doubt about that. Amanda, what's your take on that? Because I know that is something that is there even in the exercise space and everything, this notion of saying no. And sometimes we got to say yes to doing the exercise, but sometimes it's easy to say no to that, but not always easy to say no to the business part of it and all along those lines. And part of what was founded, the reason the network was founded, is that Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun, who are the 2 founders of the network, were frustrated by some of the things that were going on in the network, and they were getting told too many no's too many times, or told that, yeah, you can have a show, but because they were interviewing entrepreneurs and celebrities and other folks, but we might throw it on at 2 a.m. when nobody's really going to be watching it. So they decided to form their own network, which is what this Pod TV is. And they had a relationship at one point with IBM, which is why we had the older name, and all along those lines and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because one of the things that they talk about often is how a lot of what we're talking about isn't taught in school. Because I remember when I was going to school in the 70s and the 80s, exercise was part of what you had to do. I think that there was even an exercise course that was required, or at least one that was required. It might have been one PE when I went to Marquette in Milwaukee, and all along those lines. But a lot of the things now, even in our colleges, are not required, even from an exercise and a physical literacy standpoint. So I personally, even though I work not just in Pod TV, but with a grading company, a test grading company, that there needs to be some serious reforms in our education system, including getting back to teaching exercise in the school system. But I just wanted your take on that, and if that's something that you would like to see more of as well, because it seems like we've gotten away from that. I do remember it in the 70s, but I'm not even sure my nephews are taking any exercise courses.
Yeah, well, so I think we've kind of transitioned on topics, which I think is it's a great transition, Mark. And I will say that, I grew up with PE in school, and I was not a natural athlete. Like, I listened to Lynn and I'm like, Lynn was a natural athlete. She played every sport. I did not. I was terrible at team sports. I was terrible at hitting a ball with a racket, a bat, a club, like zero hand-eye coordination. I was the kid that was always picked last for PE teams, because what I remember about PE in school was that it was always team sports, and you were pitting one team against the other. And then there was always a team captain that was picking teams. I'm dating myself. That was the 80s. But I grew up really hating PE, and for that reason, kind of hating all things athletics. The only thing I cared about that was active was playing with horses. And so when I got into exercise physiology in my college years, it was very different, because what I learned about was individual sports. And once I was introduced to individual sports, like when I realized I was in an individual sport as an equestrian athlete, but then I also took up snow skiing and kayaking and mountain biking and things like that, where I didn't have to be picked last on a team. And I wasn't ruining a team's ability to win something. I started realizing that that PE, the exercise, that movement in general, didn't have to be this experience that I grew up with. And one of the things that I wish would happen, and this is not the space that I'm in, but the PE before I was in school, where there were like pegboards, and people climbed and they swung on rings and they did all this other just athletic skill stuff. Like, where did that go? Why do we have to play kickball and racket sports and all of that? I mean, I think introducing it is great, but just general movement and exercise would be so nice. It doesn't always have to be a competition. Maybe it's just general athletic skill building, where people are gaining flexibility and strength and self-confidence and all of that, that hopefully will transition into a lifetime of movement and athleticism, not necessarily being an athlete if they don't want to be. But yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more movement engineered in schools, because we are driving our youth into jobs that are going to have them sitting behind computers. And that gets back into all these aches and pains that I'm trying to help people get through every day. Right. So I guess that's my take on that.
No, I appreciate it. And that was a great take and everything. I did get Ronnie in. He's our last guest, and we'll learn more about him. And then we've got about another 30, 40 minutes to go, and then we'll wrap up the dinner party. And these are always fun and all along those lines. But one of the things I was going to just share with you, Amanda, and everything, is that I can relate, because I was not a athlete. I was not like Lynn. I did try to be an athlete. I tried to run track when I was in high school, and I also tried to be in the band, which my band teacher said that even though you might be a minority, don't believe every hype that is out there and every stereotype, because you are lacking rhythm. So he actually kicked me out, because he was saying that I was not of the rhythm, even though I have the minority heritage and all along those lines. But I did run track, and part of what it was in rural North Carolina, all you had to do to run track was survive. So they would run you and run you and run you some more. And if you survived, then you were on the team. So I was never any good. I think I finished dead last most of my races and everything. But part of what I do, and y'all have noticed that, because that's part of the reason that December party goes on, is I've always been good at networking. So I was able to recruit the football players and the baseball players and others to join the track team. And we won 3 out of my 4 years, because the high school was a 3-year high school, but you could run in your senior year of your junior high and all in that space. And the only reason we lost, y'all will get a big kick out of this, is because in my senior year, God rest Jimmy Robinson's soul and everything, I recruited him because I knew I could beat him. He was chubbier than me, and I knew I could beat him, and I was tired of losing. So I recruited somebody that I knew that I could beat, and we lost, I think, by like a point or two. So I didn't have that winning mindset on that particular day. So I recruited somebody that I knew that I could beat, and all along those lines. So, but it is part of my own background. So I'm like you, Amanda. Was not any good at sports. Don't think I'm any good at sports now, even more. So my dad is a swimmer and a number of other things, but I admire folks that do that.
Absolutely. Me too.
And everything. Rodney, if you can hear us, I'd love to hear a little bit of your story as well and learn more about what you've got going on. I know you're a $1 million, you've got man kind of $1 million clients and all along those lines, from what I remember Dwayna shared with me and everything. So if you can share a little bit about your background and your business knowledge as well.
was before I get started, I was absent from the camera, but I was hearing the entire conversation, and I loved what Amanda said, and also I wrote her name down because I have my glasses on. Lisa. Lynn, what Lynn, sorry, I need my glasses to see what I'm reading. What Lynn said about just self-awareness, about believing in yourself and all that kind of stuff, because I went through that journey throughout my 42-year career, and then in the last several years, built up a lot of confidence and that kind of thing. And for me, it just a slight correction. I don't have $1 million clients. I earn $1 million a year, and I coach agents how to earn $1 million a year or more as well, as far as income. And so for me, I've been in business 42 years, and about maybe a year or so ago, I started to get into the framework and mindset of, at some point, I'm going to want to probably exit sales, which I love immensely. But more than that, I'm at the point with my wife. Our son's off on his own. He's doing well financially, out of college and the whole bit. I want to spend more time traveling. And so real estate sales, while we still take several vacations a year, I'm still tied to having to come back and handle my clients. With coaching, I'm able to do that from anywhere around the world. And so that's why I want to transition slowly and succinctly into the world of real estate coaching. I feel I've got a lot to share and a lot of examples that I want to bestow upon people. And I just think I have a lot to say about the business, and I think I'd be a fantastic coach. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
And along those same lines, and this is another one of those transitional points into the dinner conversation and everything along those lines. I know one of the things that we talk about quite often, and my mom has it, well, dad does as well because he inherited grandma's property and everything, but mom and her sisters inherited several family plots and several family lands and everything that are still being passed generation to generation. And a lot of times people have let that land go. We know that it's happened in various minority communities, both black and brown, and others as well. So I just wonder your thoughts around this generational wealth and how a lot of times we are letting the generational wealth go. And Rodney, and if anybody else wants to jump in, because that is something that I know a lot of people are concerned about, is the fact that we oftentimes have the property and then we don't think that it is an asset, and the next thing we know, some major corporation, if you're living in, say, Nebraska, some big farm corporation will come and take up the property, and then you don't, if you're a small farmer, and all along those lines. I just wanted your take on generational wealth and the importance of generational wealth.
I've got a lot to say about that. I was just talking to, actually not talking to her, she was on Facebook with me, and she was asking the Facebook community, and when I say the Facebook community, she lives in the same neighborhood that I live in. We live in a 55 plus neighborhood. And so we have our own Facebook page because we have about 10,000 people that live in our community. And so she was asking, should I sell my house or should I hang on to it? And so she's in her 70s. And my advice to her was, unless you have to sell the house, hang on to it. Because the real estate, as we know, historically, whether it goes through a few ups and downs along the way, it continually always goes up in value. Then she also has the rental income potential from that property as well. So in her situation, she's in a no-lose situation by hanging on to the house. She'll get a property manager, she'll keep the house, it'll go up in value in the next 5 years, maybe $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 more. It's already paid for. She's getting the rental income. So there's really no reason to sell the house. So I just believe unless you have to sell a property, hang on to it. And that's how you create that generational wealth, hanging on to your real estate, So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Another thing that I noticed you're about, Rodney, and everything is this notion of business coaching and all along those lines. And I am amazed at how many people are entrepreneurs. Actually, our current mayor has a restaurant that he opened with his wife that is Zimbabwean oriented here in Durham, North Carolina. So Zwelly's is doing quite well, and I think they've got some spinoff restaurants that are coming from that. But one of the things that frustrates me, and I know it frustrates other people as well, is the amount of people that have these great business ideas, but they don't always have the notion of either having a prospectus or having a business plan and all along those lines. So I'd love to hear from everybody on this call and everything. Y'all talked about that, because I know that I've been on this show and other shows where people are fascinated and have these great business ideas, but they don't always have a backing or an idea of how they're going to make it come to fruition. So you can have the next best lemonade stand, and I'm just using lemonade stands as an example, but if you don't have a plan of how you're going to market it, it may not be all that successful. So Rodney, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I'd also love to hear from the ladies and Kurt as well.
Well, as far as my real estate portion of my business is concerned, I moved into this neighborhood out in Phoenix, Arizona, 8 years ago, and I was starting my business from scratch. I had no business out here at all, and so I really had to format what I was going to do to create business here. And so I followed the same protocol that I had in my last state of Florida, and then I was also licensed in Texas, where I sold real estate for 17 years in Texas. That format didn't work out here. It's a whole different kind of clientele. The mindset out here is different. Everyone here is retired for the most part, we truly live in a resort community where there's restaurants and bars and golf courses, and you can name it, we have it here behind the gates here. And so my original protocol wasn't working as far as my marketing plan. So I had to reinvent and reinvent and reinvent. And so finally, in year three or year three, my business took off because I finally hit the right marketing strategy that worked for this community. And since then, as of this year, for 2023, I am the #1 realtor in the entire city of Goodyear, Arizona, in the resale market. So I'm doing a lot of business, but it took a minute to get it off the ground. And my business really comes out of my neighborhood. But because we have so many homes behind the gates of my neighborhood, I'm able to do a lot of business just in my own neighborhood. So all of my clientele is within 10 minutes of where I live. And so, but it was trial and error at first. So I had a game plan. I always have a game plan, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work out the way that you think it's going to work out. Mm-hmm. So just had to keep on going back at it and refining it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Along those same lines, and this is for everybody on the panel and everything, you just mentioned this notion of reinventing yourself. And one of the other things that I get frustrated by sometimes, it comes back to the education system and all along those lines, is I personally think, and I think it's been going on for decades now, is that we are still continuing to teach people on to how to go to work for somebody else and not necessarily go into the entrepreneurial lanes and all along those lines. And with some of these new things taking place like AI and other things, I don't know that we're doing enough to train our kids in that space. But I do think that certain school systems still have, and I hate to use this kind of analogy, but it exists and it does make sense for what I'm saying, almost like a plantation mentality. So it's like you're going to go to work for somebody else and not necessarily to work for yourself and to make money for yourself and all along those lines. But I'd love to hear, Kurt, your thoughts around that, and any of the ladies want to jump in, and Rodney as well, because I do think that sometimes we have gotten away from this notion of teaching people enough about how to run successful entrepreneurial businesses.
It's interesting, Mark, because you talk about, not being taught that in various different things. And Lynn, I think you talked about your father, going to work every day, various different things. And so I look at my journey, and it was my family, my entire family all worked for somebody else. It was 9-to-5 jobs, various different pieces. The only one, I had a brother-in-law who started his own business. It went bankrupt, right? So the experience that I had in looking at that and doing that was like, man, this isn't for me, right? And nobody taught me in school. I got an MBA even before my PhD, and they didn't teach entrepreneurial. I mean, we're learning all the marketing and other pieces of that. But what was really interesting in my journey on that was that I ended up marrying a person here from Minneapolis who, she and her entire family, that was, he was a independent architect, and had, his business, and his father had business, and her mother had a business. And so it was all these all these other people. So sometimes I think as you're looking to be entrepreneurial, there needs to be that realization that, you're not bound by the history that you have, and that you're going to be able to do that. That being said, I loved, Rodney, I loved your idea of, you know what, it worked great in these two spots, and then I moved to this, to Phoenix, and all of a sudden that plan that worked really well that I had before is no longer working. And I think that is the big thing from entrepreneurs. And I think, Mark, your initial conversation was people have these great ideas, but they don't implement them. They don't take that next step. And I think there's a lot of fear. Again, one of the things from behavioral science that we know is there's a concept called loss aversion. This idea that a loss is felt twice as painful as an equivalent gain. So if I lose $100 out of my wallet, and that pain is twice as much as me finding $100 on the ground, right? The equivalent pleasure that I get. So we are inherently risky verse for most people. And again, different people have different personalities, and so different pieces. But I think there's a big amount of that overcoming that sense of potential risk of failure, of, how am I going to, I don't know how to do this. But I think Rodney brought up a great thing. Sometimes it's just trial and error. Sometimes you just got to get out there, you try something, and it doesn't work. Okay, well, let's pivot. Let's move a little bit here. Let's try it. And as Rodney said, have a plan, but make sure that you're not, so stuck on that vision that you have blinders on that you can't go, maybe this isn't working like I wanted it to. Maybe I need to kind of shift. Maybe I need to move a little bit. So.
Yeah. And Kurt, along those same lines, I do have to teach you because I forgot that you were from Minneapolis, and I should let you know that I am because I mentioned football earlier, I'm a diehard, and I mean diehard ever since the Fran Tarkenton days, Minnesota Vikings fan, and I do want to know if we're ever going to get back to the Super Bowl since we went 4 times and lost 4 times in a row and all along those lines. And I also want to know if we're going to get another Prince-like performer at all in that space, because I was a fan of Prince when he was living as well. So that's some of y'all's claims to fame there in Minneapolis, and I know there are others as well. But
you talk about loss, and you got a big loss. The Vikings always lose, and that was a big loss when we lost Prince. So
that was definitely a big loss when y'all lost Prince, and the Vikings always lose. Hopefully they can bounce back and we'll figure out what's going on in that quarterback situation and all of those lines. But Kurt, just really quickly, one of the things that I know that we oftentimes don't pay attention to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, is social cues. I know that I miss some of them sometimes and everything along those lines, and it is an important part of the business conversation. So could you share a little bit about how we miss those social cues and what we can do to actually observe those? Because even in business, I don't know if we pay enough attention to those social cues.
Yeah, we on my podcast, we talked with a woman who talked about reading the room, or reading the tea leaves. And actually what was really interesting is she had done all this research, and I can't remember all the different ways that people talk about it across the globe. Right. This isn't just US centric, but it is able to read social cues. And again, certain people are much better at reading social cues than others. There's a whole, again, you can look at the autism scale and various different pieces. I'm not an expert on that, but, part of that is not being able to understand social situations, how you show up, and the interactions that go in there. One of the things that I think is really important, though, is just being mindful, right? And so too often, and we talked about this before, is being stuck in our own head, is thinking about what I'm going to say next, as opposed to actually giving space and being able to be in the moment and seeing how other people are responding. Viktor Frankl, famous psychologist, was a survivor of the Holocaust and World War II, wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that, he talked about between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our ability to choose. And the idea about that is, we tend to be very much stimulus respond. And even in social cues, it's like you see somebody, they make a face, you interpret that face immediately, actually at a subconscious level, faster than your consciousness can actually comprehend it, and then we respond accordingly. And so sometimes, though, what's really important is just to be able to slow down, to be able to expand that space between that stimulus and that response. And if you can do that and be in the moment, then hopefully you can read those social cues better and understand body language and understand, are people feeling, insecure? Are they feeling, like they got to go? Are they, what are those different things? And reading the tea leaves, as they say, I think is really important.
Yeah, just really quickly, Hilda, that's what I was going to ask you and everything. Like I said, we have just a few more minutes to go, and I definitely hope to get everybody back, including Rodney, because I would definitely want to give you some more time and all along those lines and everything. But one of the things that I was curious about, Hilda, is a lot of times people are thinking about certain cultures as being more entrepreneurial than others. And one of the things that people praise the Latin culture for is the fact that the family might be like 8 in the house, but also be working like 6 or 7 different jobs and all along those lines. So I just wondered if you could speak to that, because that is a stereotype. And a lot of times those are people playing into the stereotypes, but it's also something that I observed, because even in this apartment complex that I live in, I would say that the management is majority Hispanic, and definitely a lot of the tenants might even be majority Hispanic here as well. But I just wanted your thoughts about that notion that the Hispanic community is more entrepreneurial.
I think it's a matter of generations. Younger people are thinking more in being their own bosses, not having a big company to work for, creating your own business. So it's a matter of young people. But of course, in the Mexican culture, there is a very big entrepreneurial way of doing business, but it's more an informal one. And also, there are a lot of companies that are family business, because the dad or the grandpa create a business, so now you work for it. But I do have 2 kids, and they have a difference of 10 years. And the small one, that is 29 actually, he has this mind of being an entrepreneur, and he created his own business. And the big one, she's 39, she doesn't like the idea. So young generations want to create more a business of their own than working for somebody else.
No, definitely, I can see that and everything. Hey, Rodney, just really quickly, one of the things we talked about earlier, and then I've got a question for everybody as we get ready to wrap up very shortly and everything all those lines, is this notion of the imposter syndrome and the notion of the inner critic. So I hadn't heard your answer to how you deal with the inner critic. I did hear from everybody else, but how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I got something to say about that for sure. So as far as the critic thing, just like I forgot who had mentioned it, whether it was Lynn or Amanda or somebody. I was getting initially a lot of negative talk when I first went out into the world and started doing real estate. And it came from my own father, actually, who, like Lynn was saying, her father wanted her to have a job and all that kind of stuff. And she said, no, that's not what I want to do. Yeah, I was the same way. I knew at 17, I'd be doing real estate in some form or fashion. And the reason why I knew that was because my parents owned real estate. And I saw the lifestyle they were able to have. They paid for our college. They paid for private schools for us. They had a vacation home. And I'm like, well, I think I want that too. And he did not want to hear it. And he owned property. And so I had to learn on my own how to follow in my father's footsteps.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy to me. He wanted me to get a job, yet he was an entrepreneur.
Right.
So it was just kind of a crazy situation there. But going beyond that, I remember when I was building my first model home in Texas, one of my friends said to me, "What makes you think you can do that?" Mm-hmm. And I had already done the plans, and I was under construction for a 3,500 square foot custom home in suburban Dallas. And I thought, if I listen to people like that, I will never accomplish my dreams. So at a certain point, I just had to believe in myself. And I still believe to this day that you have to be your own biggest cheerleader. Mm-hmm. And so that for me was a turning point for me when I started realizing it doesn't matter who believes in me and who doesn't believe in me. I have to believe in me. Mm-hmm. And once I believe in me, then everybody else can just sit back and watch. Whether I succeed or whether I fail doesn't matter to me as far as what they have to say about anything. Mm-hmm. Today my friends see me as a big success in what I do. And that's because I didn't listen to what anybody said. I just felt and knew that I could do it. I just had to be focused and move forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this dinner party. Like I said, Ronnie, I might have to have you come back when I've got some more time, because definitely want to get to even more details about what you're doing. But one thing I get everybody to do on the show, I'm going to go round robin, and actually I'm going to actually have to throw on some shoes, because I've actually got to run to one of my other jobs, because we have multiple jobs and all along those lines and everything, even in Durham, North Carolina, and all in that space. But I would love for everybody to share how they can be reached. And one of the things that I do on these shows is if you give a message of positivity and hope for our global community, because Pod TV is heard globally in several countries around the world, not just here in the United States in the various cities, but also in places as far as Australia, the war-torn area of Ukraine, as far as even the African countries, and a number of other ones as well. So definitely there are, I think they estimated somewhere between 150 to 200 countries that are hearing at least part of what we are airing, because we also re-air it during the course of the week and the month. So Amanda, if you'll share how you can be reached and a message of positivity and hope, and then I'll go round robin and all along those lines. So it'll go Amanda, Lynn, Kurt, then Hilda, and then Rodney to close it on out and everything. But if y'all could do that, I would greatly appreciate it. Y'all might see me off camera as I'm got to throw on those lovely socks to go with the shoes. So I want to go out barefoot with it's cold outside and all in that space. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda, if you will let folks know how you can be reached and how you can be communicated with, and your message of positivity and hope.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, for having me on again. And it's great meeting everybody on the call. The easiest way to reach me is probably through my website, which is reconnect.com, spelled RE-KINECT. So reconnect.com. You can also find me on YouTube at Reconnect, same spelling, RE-KINECT. And I just want to remind everybody that movement is something that we are gifted to have as human beings. It is our everyday right. And so all I want you to do is move more and enjoy your movement. It's been great to see everybody tonight. Thanks for your time and attention.
Lynn, it's on you.
All right, great. So you can find me at www.linnrivers.com, and that's LINN rivers.com. And I currently have a course in the make that is literally $50 in order to learn about your health and how to take your health into your own hands. And I'm making it $50 because I want people to have a no excuse cost to actually learn about their health and wellness. And my go-to is to remind people to invest in yourself. You are the one person that you're going to live the rest of your life with, and you should know yourself better than anyone else. And so invest in yourself, learn about your body, learn about your health and what you want from this life, and move forward with it step by step, no matter how small the steps are.
Fantastic. So people can reach me one of two different places. I have a podcast called Behavioral Grooves on all the podcast places. So just Groove or Google Behavioral Grooves, and that's out there. Or my company is called The Lantern Group. And so you can do www.lanterngroup.com. All one word. My message of positivity is, start a gratitude practice. It's one of the things that we know from science and research that, hey, if you are grateful about something every single day, it actually rewires your brain and you become actually more grateful and more open to those moments of awe and inspiration that come in your life. So go forth with that.
Thank you. It is a pleasure for me to be here. You can reach me in www.hildafeinso.com. And my message tonight is invest in transform yourself. Change is difficult in the beginning, is messy and disorganized in the middle, but is gorgeous at the end. Thank you.
I'm Rodney Jackson, and you can reach me at themilliondollaragent.net. And also, if you can see this book, there we go. It's called Who Ate My Cookie? And this is a book about transforming your business, in this case, real estate. And the reason why it's called Who Ate My Cookie is because I used a cookie that I personally made that catapulted my business by giving it out to my neighbors in the neighborhood. And it catapulted my business from being average to way above average. And check out the book. You can get that on Amazon.com. And if you're interested in coaching, once again, you can reach me at milliondollaragent.net. Check out my coaching website and hope to hear from some of you out there.
I greatly appreciate that, and all along those lines. And by the way, I'm thinking that everybody here on this network is going to want a copy or some samples of that cookie, because the cookie, if it can make you $1 million, I'm thinking everybody's going to want a cookie. Kurt's going to want a cookie. Hilton's going to want a cookie. Amanda and Lena going to want a cookie as well. There's $1 million cookie, because I remember the Cookie Monster from back in the day. So it was $1 million cookie. I'm thinking Amanda's going to want that cookie. Am I correct, Amanda?
Oh, absolutely.
Lynn's going like, no, I don't know. Might be Lynn might want that cookie as well. Well, I thoroughly appreciated all of y'all being on and everything. Rodney did mention the book. If anybody else has got books, we also have a bookstore here on the network as well. So if you want to give a shout out to your books, if you have books, you can do that as well. So Amanda, is there a book that folks need to know about you, and also Lynn, Kurt, and Hilda, since we did have the books, and we will definitely get those on the bookshelves, because we do have a bookstore that goes with the Pod TV website. So Amanda, is there a book that you've written, or is that on the works and everything?
Right. Not yet. But stay tuned. I might come up with one.
All right. And what about you, Lynn? Is there a book that you've got?
There is. It's in the works right now. It's called Your Health Sets the Tone. And it's in the works, but it's between the documentary and the book right now. So my time is split. So it's not quite ready.
And when will the documentary be out, or is the documentary out already? And what is the title of the documentary? Because we have a very popular documentary film festival here in Durham called Full Frame. So a number of people are familiar with that. Documentary Film Festival is considered like the Sundance of documentary film festivals in the Southeast and all along those lines. But HBO and a number of others are usually involved with it. And I've been a judge on it in the past.
That's amazing to hear. It's actually in pre-production. So it's not even in that realm yet. However, once we get there, it's going to be a pretty long production, considering we have to get a lot of licensings and regulations that go around the prison system. So that's going to be a little bit of time, but I will definitely keep you posted when it's coming out.
Please do. And if any of those people that have been involved with it, including those in the prison system, want to be on this show or on any of our other shows, that opportunity is there for you as well.
Amazing.
And Kurt, is there a book for you? And if so, what's the title of the book, or is that in the works as well?
No, there is a book. It's called the Brain Shift Journal. It's actually a guided journal that is built off of behavioral science. So it's a 13-week guided journal. Every single day, you get different prompts that are based on behavioral science principles and help you achieve your goals and set your life in right course. And there's volume 1, there's volume 2. I recommend actually starting with volume 2. We updated it, and we still have the old versions of volume 1, but it's available at Amazon.com or on behaviorshift.shop if you wanted to go out there, along with some other behavioral tools that can help you set goals better, make better decisions, and all sorts of different things. So there it is.
Sounds good. What about you, Hilda? Is there a book for you? And if so, what's the title of the book?
Mine is Power Up, the executive roadmap to transform life and business. So it's the way to understanding yourself, how to overcome what is the way, and to sustain changes. Amazon.com.
Sounds good. Well, we'll definitely get those books up, and we'll be keeping track for Amanda and Lynn's books once they get out there. And we're going to go out with a message that was something that we were alluding to earlier, and this is a PSA that deals with mental health. So I figured that was a good way to go out since we were talking about mental health. And I've got this PSA that deals with mental health. I want to say it's from the Southwest or one of those Texas areas or something along those lines, but it is a very profound message, and it's actually some kids that are talking about their mental health and why sometimes the parents are ignoring them, and all along those lines. So on that note, we'll get on out of here with this particular PSA, and I hope that all 5 of you will make a return trip in the not too distant future and join me at another dinner party. But I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope y'all enjoyed having me as your moderator and your host on this particular dinner party, and hopefully we'll see you back in the near future.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, all of you.
If you're watching this with your friends, you'll probably make a joke.
Because you know what you feel on the inside
isn't what you want people to know.
If you have to pretend to be happy,
find someone you trust and tell them.
If you get mad at things and you don't know why, or have thoughts about hurting yourself,
Find someone you trust and tell them.
You are never alone when you share.
Seriously, people care about you.
It's okay to not understand what you're feeling.
And it's easy to think that you're all alone.
But you don't have to be.
You're never alone when you share.
Don't be ashamed to tell someone you trust what you're feeling.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Find someone you trust and tell them.
Tell a parent.
Tell a teacher. Tell a brother or sister.
Or just tell a friend.
You haven't done anything wrong. Talk to someone.
Talk to someone.
It's how things get better.